We just finished going through 16 earnings called transcripts across 9 companies, covering the fourth quarter of calendar 2025 through the second quarter of calendar 2026. And now we want to share our takeaways with you. Here's the problem we set out to solve. Everybody is talking about 800-volt data centers. Suppliers are excited, the charts look great, and the word gets used in about 4 different ways that mean 4 different things. So we did it the boring way. No analyst notes, no press releases. Just what management actually said on the record with a timestamp. And what came back was one number that reframed the whole thing. Let's go find it. Let's start with the shape of the study because the method matters here. 9 companies. 3 tiers of the value chain. 16 earnings transcripts across 3 quarters. 0 analyst reports, 0 marketing material. Primary sources only. And here is what came out the other end, sitting right in the middle of the page. Across all 9 companies, $0 of reported revenue is explicitly attributed to 800-volt today. Not a small number, 0. Now hold that next to the other finding because the engineering progress is genuinely real. There is a site in Kaohsiung being built for this. And then the third piece, which is the one that stopped us. NVIDIA, the company that owns the platform everyone is building toward, mentioned data center voltage exactly 0 times across 3 quarters. Our read is that this is not a fraud story, and it is not a hype story either. It is a timing story. Something real is being built, and nobody is being paid for it yet. Those 2 facts live together comfortably, and the market usually picks one and forgets the other. Before anything else, we have to clear up a mess, because there are 4 different 800 volts floating around earnings calls. The one we care about is data center high voltage direct current. That is the rack and pod level power distribution bus. The other 3 are traps, and people fall into them constantly. There is 800 gigabit Ethernet, which is telecom and networking. When STMicroelectronics said 800 gig, that was optical transceivers. Nothing to do with power. There are EV battery architectures, where onsemi noted Chinese carmakers already pushing toward 900 volts. Different industry entirely, and there are fun 200 volt device ratings. When onsemi said 800 volts without 200 volt devices, that is component headroom, not system voltage. Then there is the trap that runs the other direction, and this one is critical. When Navita says plus and minus 400 volts, that is a bipolar configuration, and it equals 800 volts line to line. Miss that and you invert the conclusion. You rate a supplier confirming 800 volt work and conclude they are only doing 400. Quick word before we keep going. What Radar actually trades through is interactive brokers. One account reaches the US, Japan, and the other major markets, which matters when you are tracking a supply chain across 3 countries. The link is in the description. Being straight with you, this is a paid promotion. We are a customer, and they pay per click. Not investment advice. Investing carries risk. Do your own homework. Alright, back to it. Alright, the strongest piece of evidence in the whole study, and it comes from Vertiv. On the second quarter call, management said flatly, this is real, this is happening. And unlike most claims of that kind, this one has receipts. Electronics Weekly independently confirms Foxconn's Kaohsiung 1 site at 40 megawatts is being built for 800 volt DC. Named site, named client, third-party verification. That is about as good as evidence gets on an earnings call. Now let me be precise about what it proves. Because the details matter enormously. It is rack and pod level only. Vertiv's own roadmap puts data hall level 800 volt in a future 2027 or 2028 stage. The status is collaborating to build, not built and running. And that world's first title is self-proclaimed, with no independent verification behind it. Our read is that the tense is the whole story here. Present continuous, not past perfect. This proves initial construction. It does not prove commercial scale operation. And those 2 things are usually 2 years apart. Here is the distinction that untangles almost every confusing headline in the space, so stay with me. There are 4 stages, and only 2 of them are actually about 800 volts. Stage 1 runs from the second half of 2026 into the first half of 2027, and it is silicon carbide replacing plain silicon inside AC to DC power supplies. Now read the insight the deck puts underneath that, because it is the most useful sentence in the document. This is where current growth is being categorized. It is a material replacement, not an 800 volt architecture transition. Stage 2 mid-2027 puts an 800 volt bus into sidecar racks, including those plus minus 400 volt variants arriving earlier next year. Stage 3 late 2027 into early 2028 is native 800 volts running direct to the GPU trays, driven by integrated gallium nitride conversion. Stage 4 2028 and beyond is solid state transformers for facility, wide 800 volt. And Flex, sitting at the opposite end of the value chain, describes the identical sequence. 400-volt design, 800-volt design, then the future of solid state. Our take is that when suppliers report growth today, they are reporting stage 1. Investors are pricing stage 3. Now here is why we take the timeline seriously despite everything we just said. 3 completely different groups were asked separately, and they all landed in the same place. The system integrators, Vertiv and Flex. The manufacturing supply side, Flex again. And the power component makers, onsemi, Navitas, and Monolithic Power. Every one of those pathways converges on late 2027 into early 2028. And onsemi has become confident enough to give deployment dates with a stated error margin, give or take a quarter. Think about what that phrasing means. You do not put an error bar on a guess. You put an error bar on a schedule. The DEX takeaway is the right one. When companies with entirely different business models and entirely different incentives independently point to the same window, the signal-to-noise ratio is exceptionally high. And I want to be fair, because I have been skeptical for 4 pages straight. This page is genuinely strong evidence. These firms compete with each other. They have no reason to coordinate a story, and a shared wrong date would embarrass all of them at once. Our read is that the direction and the timing are probably right. What we still cannot verify is the size. And on size, this is where it falls apart, so let me walk you through the numbers carefully. There are 2 market figures floating around, and they are not measuring the same thing at all. Navitas puts $3.5 billion on the table, and that is the only figure in the entire study explicitly tagged as 800-volt specific. onsemi puts $50 billion on the table, and that one represents the total AI data center. Now here is the detail that matters. onsemi revised that figure from $12 billion to $50 billion in a single quarter. And the revision came from a formula change, back calculating per rack content against projected 2030 installed capacity. That is an algorithmic multiplier. It is not a reflection of booked revenue, and the deck says so plainly. There is useful hard data underneath, though. Navitas breaks out gallium nitride in rack conversion at $10,000 to $15,000 per megawatt, and silicon carbide power supplies at $5,000 to $8,000, plus a rule of thumb worth remembering. Double the power, 5 times the silicon carbide content. Our take is that the component pricing is real and the market sizes are marketing. Use the first, discount the second. 2 rumors have been circulating, that the transition slips to 2029 and that specific 800-volt rack designs are facing cancellation. So the study did the sensible thing and sorted every company by how they responded. In the denier column, Flex issued a front-facing denial. Good. But when Stifel's analysts pressed for capacity percentages or client certification progress, Flex refused and pushed everything to a November 10th investor day. Also in that column, Vertiv confirmed active site construction, then evasively dodged whether per megawatt content would actually reach the high end of its projected range. In the no comment column, the component makers who genuinely lack visibility into rack-level architectural decisions. That is a fair answer, not a dodge. And in the confirmed column, 0 companies. Nobody confirmed either rumor. Here is how I would read that, and I want to hold both sides honestly. The rumors are unconfirmed, and that counts for something. But the denials arrive without a single hard number attached. The deck puts it perfectly. The companies bold enough to speak provide 0 numbers, and the companies with the numbers refuse to commit. Now the finding that reframes the entire study, and it is beautifully simple. Somebody ran a text search across NVIDIA's last 3 earnings transcripts. About 139, 6 and 80 characters of management commentary. Mentions of voltage, high voltage, direct current, or power architecture. 0. And the disambiguation is careful, which I appreciate. The number 800 appeared once as 800 million OpenAI users. The phrase 500 megawatt referred to the size of AI's facility. The word power appeared 24 times, exclusively as powerful or powered by. NVIDIA talks about the Vera Rubin platform at length. It talks about rack shipments at length. It says nothing about voltage. Now, let me be genuinely fair here, because there is an innocent reading, and I think it is the likely one. An earnings call is a financial venue. Voltage architecture belongs at a technical conference, and NVIDIA has plenty of those. But the deck's conclusion still stands, and it is the sentence I would take away from this whole video. The 2027 to 2028 consensus is built entirely on suppliers' expectations of NVIDIA's roadmap. 800 volt is right now a supply chain narrative. When you read 9 companies side by side, their behavior sorts into 4 types, and the types are more informative than the claims. There is the all-in, which is Navitas. It explicitly said it prioritizes AI infrastructure over automotive, unlike some of our competitors. It gave a 4-stage roadmap with dates, and it held its ground when the rumors hit. There is the quantified better on onsemi. Granular rack content breakdowns, real volume timelines, willingly answers direct probes, and its measurement baseline shifted 3 times in 3 quarters. There's the hesitant holder, monolithic power. Extensive detail on custom silicon carbide products and a flat refusal on timing. Their line was, in terms of a win, again we know as much as you know. And there is the opt-out, Vicor, whose chief executive publicly called 800-volt hype and a distraction, then dropped the topic entirely. Our read is that you learn more from posture than from content. A company that gives you dates can be checked. A company that gives you product detail without dates has chosen to be uncheckable, and that is a decision, not an accident. Let's settle the materials debate, because it is framed wrong almost everywhere you read about it. It is not a fight, it is a map. Outside the rack, converting AC to DC, that is silicon carbide territory, and Navitas explicitly confirms silicon carbide for that stage. Inside the rack, stepping DC down to DC, that is gallium nitride territory. Navitas says there is no choice but to use gallium nitride there. Different jobs, different physics, different suppliers. Both win in different rooms of the same building, though the postures do differ. Monolithic Power uses its own silicon carbide for the 800-volt step, down and reserves gallium nitride for low power, and I have to give their chief executive credit for one of the more human moments in this whole study, admitting a past error on gallium nitride with, I didn't know what I was talking about, I guess. onsemi is advancing everything at once, lateral gallium nitride generating revenue in 2026, vertical in 2027 plus silicon carbide. And power integration showed a 200-volt gallium nitride part, then cooled it hard. Not a product, not next few quarters, next few years. The takeaway is the right one. Stop asking which material wins. Ask which circuit segment scales first and whose costs fall fastest. This page is a small masterclass in reading management, so let me walk it slowly. Watch onsemi's headline metric move across 3 quarters. In the 4th quarter of 2025, it was anchored to a verifiable timeline and year. You could check it. In the 1st quarter of 2026, it shifted to a specific 10x multiple, comparing a whole traditional rack against an AI rack, $500 against $115,000. And the upper ceiling actually improved from $105,000 to $115,000. Then in the 2nd quarter of 2026, the baseline moved again to today versus the final ultimate state, where final has no year attached to it. The 10x headline survived. Its definition shrank to cover only the high voltage portion. The true whole rack multiple is 7.7x. Now, I want to be careful and fair because the deck itself is careful here. This is not fabrication. It is shifting baselines. The total dollar value went up, which is genuinely bullish. What went down is verifiability. And that is the trade nobody announces. Our read is exactly what the deck says. Read 1 quarter and you see linear growth. Read 3 and you see a moving target. Here is a pattern I had never seen laid out this cleanly, and it applies well beyond this one theme. Track 2 lines across 3 quarters. How much a company talks about 800 volt and how many concrete timeline commitments it makes. They move in opposite directions. Talk goes up. Commitments go down. Monolithic Power is the case study. In the 4th quarter of 2025, barely mentioned in opening remarks, and they gave a loose late 2027 timeline. In the 1st quarter of 2026, zero mention in opening remarks, and analysts had to probe 3 times to get anything. No timeline. By the 2nd quarter of 2026, prominently featured in opening remarks and an explicit refusal to answer timeline questions. More talk, less accountability every single quarter. And the deck fact checks itself here, which I respect. The 800-volt DC-DC sampling and the high-voltage AC-DC work are 2 distinct product lines, so that is a consistent expansion, not a contradiction. Power Integrations did the same thing, cooling its 700-volt NVIDIA aligned products out to 2028 revenue. Our take is that both component makers are quietly pushing timeline accountability onto the system integrators. When everyone points at the next guy, nobody owns the date. Now let me give the other side of this trade its strongest possible hearing, because exactly one company made a real argument against all of this. Vicor's position is physics, not opinion, and it comes with numbers. Upgrading the bus from 400 to 800 volts buys you roughly 3% efficiency. But delivering power the last stretch from the bus down to the chip is where 15 to 20% of the energy gets lost. Their chief executive called 800 volt a distraction and hype, and argued that direct 800 volt to 6 volt step downs carry severe efficiency and safety risks. And by the 2nd quarter of 2026, the terms 800 volt and 400 volt returned 0 hits in Vicor's transcript. They refocused entirely on vertical power delivery, 12 volts to 6 to 1.8. Here is why this page matters more than its size suggests. Vicor is the only company in the study offering quantified, physics-based reasoning against the consensus. Everyone else who is skeptical just goes quiet. Vicor did the work and published a different answer. Our read is that you do not have to agree with them to take them seriously. Chasing 3% at the bus while 20% burns at the chip is, at minimum, a fair question, and their non-participation is absolute, which means they have no incentive to be right about it. So let's rank these 9 by how checkable they are, and note that this ranking is about verifiability, not about who is bullish. Highest is Vertiv. Name site, name client, phase timeline, third-party verified. High is Navitas. 4 stage dates provided, and it held its ground under fire. Medium is on CME. It does provide timelines, and the measurement baseline keeps sliding. Medium-low is Flex. Strong denials of delay, 0 capacity or certification numbers behind them. Low is Monolithic Power. Extensive product detail, absolute refusal on timing. And Vicor is not applicable because it opted out entirely. The watch list for next quarter is 4 questions. Does the late 2027 to early 2028 consensus hold or fracture? Does Navitas actually deploy that plus/minus 400 volt sidecar earlier next year as promised? Does Flex finally give hard capacity numbers at its November 10th Investor Day? And does the word voltage finally show up in an NVIDIA transcript? The study is also honest about its own limits, which I appreciate. 3 quarters is enough for trend spotting and not enough for long-term behavioral profiling. The market sizes are self-reported with incompatible methods. And Infineon, Wolfspeed, Texas Instruments, and Rome are not in the sample. Alright, last thing, radar always leaves you a light. On the 800 volt transition as an investable theme, I am calling it yellow. The engineering is real. There is a named 40 megawatt site being built right now, and 5 companies with competing interests independently point at the same 18-month window. I am not calling this hype, and Vicor's argument, good as it is 1 voice against 5. It is yellow because of one number. $0 of reported revenue across 9 companies is explicitly attributed to 800 volt today. What is growing right now is stage 1, a silicon carbide material swap, and that is being priced as if it were the stage 3 architecture transition. Here is what flips me to green, and I am saying it up front so you can hold me to it. If the word voltage appears in an NVIDIA transcript, or Flex puts hard capacity and certification numbers on the table in November, the narrative stops being a supply chain expectation and becomes a schedule. I go green that day, and what turns me red is equally clear. If that late 2027 window slips even 1 quarter across 2 or more of these companies, the whole convergence argument on page 5 falls apart, because convergence was the entire reason to believe the date. I am about 70% that the direction is right and considerably less confident on the timing. That gap is the whole trade. If you like this kind of analysis, the kind that does not ride the market's mood and stays locked on industry data and hard logic, please subscribe to Value Stock Radar. Hit the bell, like and share. Your support is what keeps us digging through the financials and hunting down quality names. This is Value Stock Radar. See you next time.